Think medieval people were all about purity, prayer, and chastity? Think again. If you thought the Dark Ages were sexually repressed, buckle up, because what you're about to hear makes modern dating apps look like Sunday school. From aphrodisiac feasts made of animal testicles to public impotence trials where men had to perform in front of a judge, this was a time when sex was everything, and privacy was nothing. The Middle Ages weren't dark because people weren't having sex. They were dark because of what people were doing while having it. Let's begin with one of the weirdest dating customs ever imagined: bundling. You're a young man in medieval Europe. Your parents find you a potential bride. Romantic dinner? Nope. You're tied into a sack and tossed into bed with her. Welcome to bundling, the medieval version of a sleepover, with ropes, full clothing, and often a wooden board separating you. Yes, a literal plank between two horny teenagers. And here's the twist. Parents encouraged this. They thought bundling was a wholesome way for couples to bond. Entire industries sprang up just to make bundling bags and special chastity bedding. But guess what? Pregnancy rates among bundled couples were higher than with traditional courtship. Go figure. Wrap two teenagers together and tell them not to touch, and somehow they still manage. Church leaders ranted against bundling, but rural families ignored them. Think of it as the medieval version of trying to ban TikTok. Morally outraged adults versus unstoppable hormones. Food as foreplay, the aphrodisiac. Feasts of the Middle Ages, forget oysters. Medieval people believed animal testicles were the key to great sex. Bulls, rams, boars, you name it. They roasted them, fried them, boiled them, even ground them into powder and mixed them with wine. These delicacies, known politely as stones, were considered elite sex enhancers. But it didn't stop there. Sparrow brains were served to boost libido. Dishes made from animal reproductive organs were thought to transfer fertility. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and ginger weren't just flavor. They were believed to fuel desire, which is why they were as valuable as gold. Wealthy nobles threw lavish love feasts, where every dish was aimed at turning guests into sex-crazed maniacs. And weddings? They weren't complete without 7 courses of sexual superfoods. Medieval cookbooks even included chapters titled Foods That Arouse Lust. These weren't secret scrolls, they were medical texts studied by scholars. During religious fasting, some aphrodisiacs were banned, not for health reasons, but because they were considered too sexy. That's right, even food was too horny for Lent. In the Middle Ages, consummating a marriage was a public matter, literally. Nobles were legally required to have sex in front of witnesses to validate their union. Why? Because marriages involved land, money, and power, and without proof of penetration, the whole deal could be annulled. After the wedding, the bride and groom were undressed by same-sex relatives, paraded to the bedchamber, and tucked in under the watchful eyes of priests, nobles, and family. Some witnesses gave encouragement, others took notes. It wasn't voyeurism, it was protocol. To prove virginity, blood on the bedsheets was often required. If there wasn't enough evidence, the couple might have to try again. This wasn't limited to kings. Any union involving property might require the same humiliating ritual. Manuals even instructed guests on where to stand and how long to watch. Medieval couples scheduled sex like it was a NASA launch. Astrology told them when the stars aligned. Medicine told them the woman needed a hot and moist humoral balance. Religion? That added hundreds of blackout dates. You couldn't have sex on Sundays, Wednesdays, Fridays, during Lent, Advent, menstruation, pregnancy, breastfeeding, or while traveling. So, about 180 days a year were off limits. And if you wanted a boy, better tie off your left testicle. That's right. They believed boys came from the right testicle, girls from the left. The wealthy even hired sex consultants, a mix of priest, astrologer, and doctor, to make personalized fertility schedules. These specialists factored in star signs, moon phases, and even room direction. East-facing beds were preferred. Conception became a full-time job requiring calendars, rituals, and expert consultation. Underwear wasn't just clothing, it was a sacred object. Fertility belts called girdles of Venus were worn by women, inscribed with prayers and astrological symbols. Some even had instruction manuals. Amulets containing ground gemstones, unicorn horn, actually narwhal tusk, or animal parts were stitched into lingerie. Conception stones were worn inside underwear, emeralds for boys, sapphires for girls. Men wore rings made from testicles. Yes, again with the testicles. The church blessed these garments, for a fee. Priests would perform full rituals over belts and bedsheets. It was like subscribing to a holy OnlyFans. If your belt didn't work, there was a troubleshooting scroll. Wealthy couples had gold-threaded undergarments. The poor made do with herbs and wool. Either way, getting dressed became a sexual ritual. Part religion, part magic, all ridiculous. Divorce was nearly impossible in medieval Europe, unless you could prove your husband was impotent. And by prove, we mean perform. Enter the impotence trial. First, both spouses underwent genital exams by medical experts. Then, they were interrogated separately about their sex life. Still not enough? Time for a trial by Congress. This was exactly what it sounds like. The couple was ordered to have supervised sex in a special room, with judges or doctors watching. Peepholes, curtains, sometimes no barrier at all. If the man couldn't perform, the marriage was annulled. Some men tried to cheat using medieval Viagra, herbs, potions, even smuggled charms. Court clerks often found aphrodisiacs hidden in underwear. Women weren't spared. They had to prove they were sexually enthusiastic. These trials dragged on for months. Some couples were forced to try dozens of times. It was less of a marriage and more of a state-sponsored sex experiment. You'd think the medieval church would be the last place to endorse prostitution. Think again. In 12th century London, the Bishop of Winchester ran 18 licensed brothels, employing over 1,000 women. The church called prostitution a necessary evil, claiming it prevented worse sins. So they taxed it, regulated it, and profited from it. Prostitutes paid rent to brothel owners, who paid rent to bishops. The money funded churches, monasteries, and cathedrals. Rules were strict. No working on holy days, dress codes, regular medical exams. But the profits were enormous. Even attempts to shut down church-owned brothels faced resistance. Too many people were making too much money. For centuries, the same institution that preached purity ran the largest sex operation in Europe. That's not just hypocrisy, it's divine business strategy. Want to avoid pregnancy in the Middle Ages? Prepare for horror. Women wore weasel testicles around their necks. Why? Weasels were promiscuous but had small litters, so their balls must grant fertility control. Makes sense, right? They drank potions made from beaver bits, mercury, iron shavings, you name it. Some just poisoned themselves to avoid birth. Effective, but terminal. Physical methods were worse. Women inserted crocodile dung, honey-soaked wool, and even half a lemon. Sneezing was recommended immediately after sex. Yes, sneezing. Some walked backwards around churches while chanting. Withdrawal existed, but was said to cause blindness, madness, and death. Basically, birth control was a roulette wheel of superstition, poison, and animal parts. The Middle Ages weren't some sexually pure utopia. They were a maze of repression, obsession, superstition, and holy contradictions. A time when sleeping with someone meant being tied to them, literally. When sex had to be scheduled around the planets. When underwear was magical, and impotence was tried in court. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Medieval people weren't afraid of sex. They were obsessed with it, controlled by it, willing to believe anything to manage it. And the institutions that claimed to save their souls often profited from their sins. History isn't always about kings and battles. Sometimes it's about testicles, bed sheets, and magical belts, and that, perhaps, is even more revealing.